Hello! In this video, I'm going to do a rundown of the books I read in quarter one of 2025. So I read 17 books this quarter. They're mostly non-fiction, but there is a fiction book in there as well. The best book I read is Aspiring Actuarial Leaders, The Modern Manager's Toolkit by Julia Lessing. It's a really great book and I genuinely recommend it. So if you are a senior analyst thinking about moving into management or a new manager or even a new department head, I think this is a really good book for you to read. In pricing especially, I know it's aimed at actuaries, but I think it's got quite transferable skills for someone working in a pricing team. And it's really good for learning actual skills and actual ways of working in a team with other people and managing and leading that team. It's very practical. It's very do this, try this, work through this. It's very structured way of doing things. You get some good workbook style activities to use, and actually you can measure your progress quite well and how you actually do these. It's very clear that these are things that you develop by doing. So it tells you, or it helps you to learn how to do these things, how to do management, how to help people, how to develop a sort of secure environment for people where they're comfortable, how to deal with mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable, so it talks about how to be honest about them and also how to avoid them. I think it's really good. So I myself found it quite difficult when I first became a department head. I went to managing about 12 people. I was leading managers who had their own teams, and I found that a really difficult transition. And I think if I'd worked through this book whilst I was a manager of a smaller team, I would have really developed those skills that were useful when I stepped up. So definitely recommend this book. The next two books are both insurance related books. So the first one is Why Insurance Markets Fail and What to Do About It. That's by Liran, Einav, Ray Fisman, and Amy Finkelstein. This is a good book. So anyone that works in insurance, particularly pricing, should probably read this book. It's pretty much an entire book about anti-selection, but it is fantastic. It really makes you think about why so many of the products are structured in the way that they are, why so much pricing is structured in the way it is, why a lot of the market operates in certain ways, and how the world outside of insurance just does not get that. And what we should do about that, what they are doing about it, why they've written the book to actually try and explain that to people. I think we've all seen startup ideas where we're like, oh, not sure that's going to work. And the reason we're not sure that's going to work is because people are open to anti-selection. It's an insurance that you just think to yourself, only people that think they're going to claim are going to buy that insurance. Particularly, they run through the example of divorce insurance. So who is likely to buy divorce insurance? It's got to be people that on some level think there's some possibility that their marriage might split in the future. Nobody who is happily rosy-eyed in the middle of their marriage is going to buy this insurance. So it's an example that they use. It's very powerful. Really makes you think about what about the way that people behave when they buy insurance products. There's lots of other examples as well. They go really deeply into the area of medical cover, life cover. They really cover the products where we genuinely need to ask lots of questions and collect lots of useful information, like on car, like on home, like on life assurance, ones that are where we're really exposed to being selected against. And they also go through the products where it's not such a good idea to ask lots and lots of questions, such as medical insurance, where you do want it to be available for everyone and you don't necessarily want too much of the self-selection pressures forcing people out of the system. So it's very good. It also goes through some of the court cases that have happened in insurance, some of the American US Supreme Court rulings that have really just been bonkers. and how people just do not understand anti-selection in the real world, and how they come along and think that insurance operates in a way that is antiquated or bad for them or something like that. But the reality is it operates in the way that it has to, and it is a good way. It's just people need to understand why it works how it does. So the next book is The Art of Uncertainty. Again, this is a really good book. It's been #1 on the Amazon charts for months. I'm glad I've noticed it when I've looked for Price Writer. I'm afraid to check where I'm in the charts. And it's been top or near the top for absolutely ages. And I can see why. It's a really good book. So it's not specific. It's very much about probability and statistics. So it's not absolutely specifically about insurance, but it's incredibly transferable and relevant for what we do. It's also quite interesting to consider that what we largely think of as being probabilities are opinions most of the time. Even things that we're pretty confident, like with dice rolls, there are elements of the fact that we're not always doing controlled experiments and things. So even when we are like, it's a fair dice, we're assuming things about that dice and saying that it's fair when we don't necessarily know that's the case, actually. And it goes even deeper. So, and you can really think about this with like insurance pricing, because when we come up with frequencies and severities, and then our expense loadings on top of it, and all the things we do in the demand layer and stuff like that, these are opinions, actually. And I think it's hard for us to admit that they are opinions, but there's so much that goes on. And in fact, this is not reduced or got rid of by the idea of data science. And as everyone will know, I'm totally a supporter of the data science side. And we did data science before we called it data science. It's the same thing. But ultimately, if you only do the data science side, if you're just like, I do not need to do the opinion and the judgment bit and the understanding bit, this will not work. It will fail. You will lose money, because you are producing opinions using your data, but you've just removed yourself from the control you have over that and the understanding you have over that. Particularly in insurance, the world is always in motion. What's in our past data is not what the world's going to be like in future. How things operate, everything's always changing, and we will never have enough data. Every claim is different. So every time there is a claim, it is an experiment in the world with a sample space of 1. Every policy has a sample space of 1. That's the reality. We act like they are homogeneous units that we can all clump together and do lots of fancy analysis on. And to some extent, that's true, but it's not really true. And that's the point here in the book. These things are all different. They're all in motion. They're all heterogeneous. And we can use statistics on stuff, but we have to also appreciate that a lot of this is built on a lot of foundations and a lot of assumptions. And no matter how much we get dispassionate and use machine learning and all of this for it, the reality is that we are still dealing with extremely uncertain things. So great book, really good, highly recommend. So I'll run down non-fiction books that I read. So I read Kind by Graham Allcott. This running businesses or being manager or being a leader of an organization. So the idea is that you can do this in a way that is kind. And kind is not the same as being nice. So someone who's nice is a pushover. Someone who's nice doesn't check up on things. They don't make sure people are telling the truth and things like that. They don't have difficult conversations. Leaders that are kind will do all of those things, but they do them in a kind way. He used a good example of when Barack Obama had to fire someone, but actually Barack Obama did it in a very emotionally intelligent way that left the person feeling like they appreciated the reasons for the decision, even if they didn't agree with them. And that's what we're talking about. You still have those difficult conversations, but you do it in a kind way. And your initial assumptions are always to see the benefit of the doubt and to be kind to people until you have reason not to. And when you do have those difficult conversations. So I really like this, actually. I think it's got very useful tips. And yeah, I enjoyed it as a book. Next one is Dare to Lead. It's by Brené Brown. And it's similar to Kind. They got a bit mixed up in my brain, actually. But this one is about being vulnerable as a leader. So you invite people into your space and your values, and you are open with them, and you build trust with people that you can, that reciprocate with you. Reciprocation is quite an important part of it. So you allow yourself to be vulnerable and you work towards an environment where people are comfortable with vulnerability. They're comfortable with being quite open, and you develop emotional bonds with people. I thought this was really good. I think, again, it's a practical book. It's something you can use at work. It's not naive either. It does give you good ways of appreciating when things are working or when you might have to change direction or tack with people. Both Kind and Dare to Lead are honest about the fact that sometimes you will need to remove people from your team. Some people will not fit. The next one is The Authority Gaps. This is by Mary Ann Sieghart. Now, this is an eye-opening book. Even as someone who I would say I'm pretty aware of gender sort of politics at work and so on, this is still a real eye-opener. It really made me think about my own office behaviour and things that I have seen in the past and ways that people have behaved. And it is full of statistics. It's full of quality studies. It quotes a lot of really hard evidence about how people behave. So, as an example, women are interrupted far more often than men in meetings. They're talked over more often. And these aren't anecdotal things. She's got hard evidence of recorded meetings that people have written academic papers about. These are big studies into these things. And it does really make you think. I remember a particular case that I witnessed once where a very senior person in an organisation, during a talk, during an update being given by another person, he just quite suddenly went, reviewing Jeremy here, I realised a lot of people listen to this rather than watch it. So he shushed her, he made shushing sounds and moved his hand downwards towards the desk until she stopped talking. And it was a meeting I didn't normally go to, but I was really surprised that by that behaviour, but also that I was the only person that was visibly because I'm no good at poker face. I was the only person that was like, wow, that's quite a surprising way to behave. So the whole book it makes you think about how you behave, and it made me think back. So it points out that a lot of the times when people greet a group of people, they will generally shake hands with men first and then women. I think that's true. I think that's something I've observed having read it. I've thought about it as well. How often will you shake hands with the tallest male before anyone else? And it's really odd how I do think that's something that people do. And there's really good evidence that that is the case. So really good book. I think everyone should read it. Zig Ziglar's Secrets of Closing the Sale. So Zig Ziglar comes up in lots of psychology books as someone to read. I found this quite a fun book. I don't think it's really got much useful to it. It's very kind of old style, sort of American sales, clothes and all of that. But Zig Ziglar seems like a really nice guy, and it's a nice book in the way that it's written. It's got lovely stories about how he behaves, and he uses good things from his family. So yeah, it's quite nice. I didn't think it was that useful, but it's quite nice. I read The Imposter Cure. This is by Dr. Jessamy Hibberd. So I found this good, actually. I generally don't think as someone who has much imposter syndrome, but actually I do. And this book actually made me think, no, I think this is something I don't have, whereas actually I do. So particularly there is someone in my life that actually didn't tell I'd written a book because they are an author. And I just felt I would be treading on their toes if I ever mentioned it. But now it's been out for a year, I was a bit like, okay, it's going to seem a bit strange. But because of this book, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to tell them I wrote a book and give them a copy. And I am really negative about my own work. If I meet someone and they're like, oh, yeah, I picked up some of your work years ago, I am just like mortified. I'm practically apologizing. And or someone might say, oh, I had cause to read a paper that you wrote 10 years ago. I'm just like, oh, no, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I'm sure I've done much better work than that. But always, I'm just always feel really negative when people talk about having seen any of my old work. And I tend to downplay the awards that the book has won. I even in my mind, I think to myself, oh yeah, but it's not a serious award, is it? It's not, yeah. And it's imposter syndrome. These are real things and you should be proud of them. So I do think people should read this, even if especially if you think you have got imposter syndrome, but even if you think that you're over it, this is a good book to read. I read $100 Million Offers. It's by Alex Hormozi. It's actually a reread. I read it and was like, nah, it seems jam-packed with really useful marketing stuff, but then I didn't really find anything useful from it. So I thought I'd reread it because I was like, well, maybe there was a load of stuff and I just haven't tried implementing it or whatever. But no, I came away feeling it's quite fluffy. It's a little bit bro culture as well. So I definitely don't recommend this one. Politics on the Edge. So that's Rory Stewart's book. I think he's really good, and it's a really good book. He is a very interesting character. He reminds me a lot of Ken Clark, whose biography I've also read. Something interesting in his book and in Ken Clark's book is that they both admit to quite a lot of failures when it comes to things like handling the media or dealing with the internal politics of their own party and things like they do howling mistakes with that, and they're quite honest about it. Neither of them ever admits to any policy failures. So Rory Stewart does tend to come across as I was always pushing for the right thing, and everything I implemented was really good. And the things I didn't implement would have been really good as well. So, yeah, and I can't quite get with that view, really, particularly of that period. But he doesn't come across as a very earnest, nice person who is in politics for good reasons. So, I did like the book. I would say it's worth reading. Some stuff will probably like get you annoyed though. And some of the ways that Parliament just operates just are really angering, is really inefficient. I read Apocalypse Never by Michael Shellenberger. So the the premise here is that climate change is a thing, but we don't really need to worry about it so much. There's much worse things going on in the world, so let's try not to worry about it so much, especially as we can burn lots of natural gas, and that's nowhere near as bad as coal, so everything will be fine. In a way, there's something I agree with him with. He does talk about prioritization as being an issue, and I can get with this. There are things that are much more important to deal with than other things, but actually climate and environmental policy do tend to be a little bit like scattergun and not really appreciate that we probably ought to try prioritizing the issues. He used the example of plastic straws. Is it really that big an issue, particularly with there being so much backlash against it, that you end up being like, yeah, we ought to deal with the coal thing, but people are busy having arguments about the straw thing. So I can get with that. I really didn't like the style this was written in. So it is lists, and it is a long book. Like it is a long, long, long book. And mostly it's chapters about specific subjects like energy, like nuclear power, like wind, like conservation. So, and it's then just pretty much lists inside that. It's paragraph structured, but it's very listy. And it's generally lists of why things aren't as bad as they seem. So I did a very rare thing. The last 3 chapters of this book were very long. I skipped them and just read the epilogue. But I had soldiered through hundreds of pages by then. I actually halfway through went back and read the introduction because I was like, what's the message of this book meant to be? I just forgot because it's so listy. I just had to go back and remind myself that it is about that we shouldn't really worry too much about this. And I think one of the things that's quite difficult in the book is that the things that in one chapter will be lauded as things not to worry about or things to worry about will then be the opposite in other chapters. So, for instance, in the section on biodiversity, it's just very like, biodiversity is just not a problem. It's not going to cause any issues if lots of things go extinct. Fine. Okay. Then when he's writing about how it's okay just to burn lots of natural gas, one of the things he uses as a reason why it's okay to burn lots of natural gas is that wind farms kill lots of birds and that's bad for biodiversity. But he's already told me not to worry about biodiversity. So, and it's like A does not equal B or C in that argument. So just because wind farms kill birds does not mean it's okay to burn natural gas. And this is just pretty common in the book, really. Like, nuclear power is okay because it doesn't really kill that many people. And generally, human progress has always been towards being more efficient in the use of energy. So we shouldn't worry because everything's getting more efficient. And it's messy logic. So I don't recommend it, even though I think there could have been a good book in here because I think some of the points are useful, but it's messy and it's incoherent and it's very dull.
It's reviewing Jeremy here, and I just wanted to say why I think there could have been a good book in here. As I see it, the world has always moved towards getting better and better because of 2 things. One is capitalism and one is government. So I do think both of them work well together. And I do think the world can be an optimistic place. I think we can do good things in the future. But it requires human endeavour to actually achieve those things. And just taking an attitude of things aren't really that bad, actually, and getting on with it doesn't seem to me like it's going to solve any problem. But taking an attitude of we can use capitalism and government regulation together to achieve things, that to me would have been a much better message.
So I read Traction. This is by Gabriel, Weinberg and Justin Mares. It's a useful book, but not an interesting book. So it's a marketing book. It goes into multiple marketing channels and how to use them effectively. So one of them's email marketing. One of them's social advertising. It's quite boring, but it's quite useful. Oh, I read Let It Go. So this is my extraordinary story from refugee to entrepreneur to philanthropist. It's by Stephanie Shirley. She is really interesting. So she escaped on the kinder transport from Austria and she went on to found a software company. And so this is back in the 60s or the 70s. I think she actually started in the 60s, and it's one of the very first like makers of software. So it's pre-Microsoft. It's really early production of software. But she worked from home and she employed women programmers who also worked from home. Like, really, genuinely, people say words like decades ahead of its time, but this actually was. So she had a business with no premises, no overheads, none of that, and they would sell software. It was mostly bespoke made software, but they would sell software to people. It was fantastic, and they were all doing this in between raising their families and so on. Absolutely brilliant. So I really liked all of that. It's another one where I like the startup journey, and at some point it crosses over into being a very big business, and she mostly spends her time as sort of chairperson of this business. And I don't find boardroom discussions terribly exciting. There's one other thing that I find a bit odd about this book, and so she had a very autistic child, and I think that the story she went through, the journey she went through with the care system and everything with this child is very interesting, and it's quite harrowing, but I think it's an important story that she's told. But what's difficult is that it will be 10 or 20 pages of business, then 10 or 20 pages about the autistic child, or it might switch like after only a couple of pages, and it's a bit like you're changing gear all the time. And I wonder if it might have been better as two books about two separate subjects. Both are worthy of talking about. It's just quite hard to read. So next one is I read Dear Female Founder by Lu Lee. So this is a collection of letters. They're sort of about 3-4 pages long each, from successful female founders to other founders. I got this. A friend of mine is about to become a director in a small business. It's the first time she will have been a founder in a business. It's a very exciting journey for her. And I just thought this would be a really good book to get her, but I thought I'd best read it first to check it's any good. And I'm not going to be giving it to her, sadly. So the problem is that it's very much targeted at people that are founding technology companies with VC backing. And that is often the area I think people are most excited to read about, in fairness, but it's also a micro percentage of the people that actually set up successful businesses. So in that way, I just don't think it's that relevant. Plus, pretty much most of the letters give the same advice, which is build a good team, work hard, listen to customers. It's advice that you will hear in lots of places when you start in business. And in fairness, they're quite short letters, so people can't really say much else. But there just really isn't much variety between the letters. So in a way, I think the book is a missed opportunity. I think having a short letter from a multiple female founders, but have them give specific advice, not the same advice repeatedly, and having it be a really big mixture of types of businesses, I think that'd be a much more interesting book. And the last non-fiction book is Be Useful by Arnold Schwarzenegger. I actually read this book twice. So I got to the end of it and I read it again, and it's a reread. So it's this, I've read it before. This is a really, really good book. If you are feeling like things are quite hard, like your enthusiasm or your motivation is taking a bit of a dent, this is a great book to read. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is fantastic. So the guy is an environmentalist. He is very strongly supports social justice. He very strongly supports social programs, but he is also slightly right wing, and he is fiscally conservative. And he is someone who came to a country as an immigrant. He has a very strong Austrian accent, and yet is still a massive movie star. I just think the guy's brilliant. And the way that he goes about things is really brilliant as well. He's very caring, he's actually very emotionally intelligent. And one of the really interesting things in a lot of his stories is how much he got treated like how we used to say that people get treated they're treated like bimbos. So people are surprised he is articulate. People are surprised he is intelligent. People assume that he won't be any good at things. They assume that his only interest is in stardom and fame. And actually, he's very deeply caring about things. He's very good at planning, very good at working through and achieving things. I think the guy's brilliant. Really, really good. I thoroughly recommend this book. It's a structured way of maintaining motivation and being successful, but it's actually really useful and practical. So yeah, I think this is a great one to read. So I read one fiction book this quarter. It's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. No, I've never read this, so I have thought for quite a while. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a book that you read as a teenager, and I'm not really a teenager anymore, obviously. So I was like, I just didn't really have an interest in reading it. But I happened over a YouTube video that was about Georgian economics, but it was told through using the characters in Pride and Prejudice to talk about actually wealth inequality in Georgian England. So it's quite good. And that sort of set my mind on it. And our assistant at Pricewriter, she is an English literature graduate, as is my brother and my wife, actually. So I just thought to myself, do you know what? I will read this book. I will get inside kind of everyone else's head and read Pride and Prejudice. It is good. It is funny. Like, it is really funny. It is laugh out loud funny. I had no idea how funny it was. I don't think people have ever said to me, it's really funny, you should read it because it's really funny. So I think people have a tendency to want to be like, I'm like this character or that character. And I think that's good because it shows how good the characters are. They are pretty three-dimensional. They all interact, but they all are different people. You feel they're different people and you learn about how they are. No one is particularly good or bad in the book. There are good and better characters, but I wouldn't even say even the bad character is an irredeemably bad character. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pick a character and say I'm like that person. I think it's a real cliche for anyone that's introvert to be like, I'm just like Mr. Darcy because at some point I have been socially awkward and it's come across as that I'm aloof or arrogant. I think most of us have at some point, most of us introverts have at some point probably done something like that. So I don't think it makes us like Mr. Darcy, and I'm not really sure if we want to be like Mr. Darcy, but I'll get to that. I do think so. There's a character in it, Mrs. Bennet, who is often done down in a way, and I actually didn't really read it in the same way that people do. So they tend to see her as being quite a silly woman who's very obsessed with her daughter's marrying. But actually, she's the only person thinking about what's going to happen to my children when I and my husband are no longer around to look after them. So she's trying to get them married for that reason. And she displays some really bad social awkwardness. She does some real faux pas. And the way the narrative works, it's meant to make us think of her as a silly person because of this. Lots of people in this book make a lot of bad social choices. Mr. Darcy himself, as I've just said, does this. And we aren't like that about him. And I felt there's a bit of a sexism and a bit of a classism. As a modern reader looking at this character, I felt like it's a bit judgy. And another interesting one is her husband, Mr. Bennet. So he is a really fun character, but he's also not thinking about what's going to happen to his daughters after he's not around anymore. Mr. Bennet, he needs to be focused on these things, and he tends to be quite withdrawn. He finds the whole thing quite amusing at times, and it's not. Another character I really want to talk about is Lydia. So Lydia is the youngest daughter, and the narrative really gives her no sympathy at all for the way that she behaves and the choices that she makes. And I don't think that's really fair. quite a lot of characters in this story are tricked by the bad character that I mentioned, but we don't feel like that about them. We're quite forgiving to them, including Darcy's own father is taken in by this character. And yet we don't think of him as being like a silly person. We don't think of him as being selfish. So I just found that quite interesting that the narrative makes this, and I guess as a youngest, I probably feel a little bit of sympathy for her in that way as well. And there's a bit where she lords over her new status to her older siblings, and that is such a natural thing for a youngest to do, isn't it? Let's not be judgy over that. A youngest would, I see nothing wrong with that. You get your chance, so you're going to use it in that way. So I just, I guess I feel a bit sorry for Lydia. I think it would be awful for this girl if she'd ended up with someone boring. Someone like Mr. Collins, Bingley, who are just boring characters. Even I think if she'd ended up with the hero Darcy, I don't think she'd have been happy in that way. I don't think any of those people that I mentioned would appreciate her. I think within a couple of years, it would be a marriage where she just isn't listened to. She's probably ignored, and I'd find that quite sad, really, because I think she's quite fun. So I also have another character, which is Mary, the middle sister, who is just a bit ignored by the narrative. However, I quite like her. She's described as being pedantic and bookish, and I'm not sure I see either of those being bad characteristics with a person. Pedantic can often be confused with just being accurate and caring about accuracy of things, and I'm not sure that's a problem. There are two characters I really dislike, though. So there's Mr. Collins, and he is a proper bore. So he is simultaneously a real suck up to the people above him in the social order and really snobbish with the people below him. And we all know people like that. He's also not a fun person to be around. He is just boring, suck up. I have definitely known middle managers like this. And yeah, we live with people like this even now, definitely. That is not an archetype that's gone away. The character called Catherine de Bourgh, and I find her snobbery just horrible. And the last character I want to talk about is Elizabeth. So she is the main character, and I don't think I like her actually. She's rather goody good. She thinks of herself as being very clever with people, but she's just as prejudiced as a lot of the other characters. She's really snobbish and ill-tempered with her own family and her friend. And she never shows any sympathy to what happens to her younger sister. At least if she does, I missed it. So she very much acts like Lydia, behaves in a silly way, and the horrible, terrible, embarrassing consequences on us and the family because of it. It's never like she was taken in, she was tricked. And I don't see much sympathy in that. And it's also like the girl probably was in love as well. People do behave in ways that they perhaps wouldn't do if they were using their better judgment. But love is love. So that's it for the book. As I said, it's really funny. And there's a particular couple of chapters that are based around a proposal that does not go well. And it's actually a humour that I thought was quite modern. It's this like uncomfortable British humour where it's like it's just like watching something awfully uncomfortable unfold. For pages, it goes on, and it ends. The tension is released by Mr. Bennet, and it is funny. Like I laughed out loud at the end of this chapter. It's very good. So that's it for those books. The final one, I'm not going to go on about the kids' books I read, but I am going to tell you about one. So I read Reaching for the Moon, the autobiography of NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson, and it's by herself, Katherine Johnson. This is a really good book. So it's a biography of her life. She lived to be slightly over 100. So she was born towards the end, at the end of the First World War, and she lived till COVID time. So that's quite a stretch of time. She is African American and a woman and an absolute genius at maths and at French. So she's incredibly clever. She was so clever as a girl that she was so good at maths as a 4-year-old that her parents thought her brother was slow at learning maths. So they gave her brother more help and attention at learning maths because his sister was so naturally good at it. They assumed that he needed help. And this actually links in really well in my mind with the authority gap that I talked about earlier. So in the authority gap, there's statistics on how many people Google things like, is my son gifted versus is my daughter gifted? Now, spoiler alert, people Google the son one a lot more, and it's very similar here. So their parents provide more help to her brother because it doesn't occur to them that their daughter might be a genius at mathematics. And it's her life, and it's nicely, tenderly told. It's a good mixture of what she does at work and what the world is like for her, because she lives through some of the most incredible social change. And we think that there's a lot of political upheaval now. The 60s were, particularly in the USA, were incredibly social, incredible times of massive social change. And there was a lot of opposing forces and a lot of revolt. And it was a difficult time for a lot of people. And it went through a lot of positive change came out of it. So it's really good to read about that. But really good book. Very good for a child as well. The only thing I would say is that because it's written by someone that was born over 100 years ago, the language is not things we would find it acceptable to say now. And she's just totally comfortable with it. So that's just something to be prepared for, particularly if you're reading it out loud to a child, because you might find yourself using some words you find very uncomfortable. So that was it. That's my 17 books from 2025 Q1. It's been really fun talking about them, actually. So I'll be back talking about the same thing at the end of Q2. So have a lovely day, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.